Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this month's installment of Economics in Action. I'm your host, Mackenzie Castle from Northwood University and the McNair Center. And with me today is Dr. Timothy Nash, Senior Vice President at Northwood University and Director of the Robert and Janice McNair Center for the Advancement of Free Enterprise and Entrepreneurship, and one of our McNair scholars, Josh Weckesser, who is a junior economics major at Northwood University. Today's episode will take a look at the economic status of the United States from the month of July and into the beginning of August. You can find the printed version of the monthly economic outlook in the Midland Daily News, upcoming in an issue. Today, I guess we'll jump right in with you, Dr. Nash. What's the general overall state of the economy?
Well, you know, what's interesting, I think, Mackenzie, is that if you look at the economy and you think about a very famous quote by Milton Friedman, Dr. Friedman said that most economic fallacies are derived from a tendency to assume that there is a fixed pie and that anybody's gain has to be somebody else's loss. And, you know, it's a real appropriate quote to use today because when you look at the U.S. economy, especially as we're looking at the fall elections, you're starting to see the political sides line up against each other, and that you know, the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, or the rich are getting too large a share of the pie. And I would like to suggest that you know, Dr. Friedman's argument is you can build a larger pie, and that larger pie is going to have everyone benefiting, not necessarily proportionally, but that a growing economy is a good and prosperous economy. And so if you look at the data over the last year for GDP, the U.S. economy is growing at a rather impressive rate, especially a rather impressive rate for 1 year relative to the last 10 years. And so if you see here on slide 3, the U.S. economy grew at 3% the third quarter of 2017, 3.1% the fourth quarter of 2017. Was down a bit in the first quarter of this year, and our second quarter data just came out for April, May, and June of 2018, and the economy grew at 4.1%. And so when you look at that kind of growth, especially when the government is estimating, the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta has a real good forecasting model called FED, or GDP Now, and they're calling for 4.3% GDP growth in the third quarter. So if you look at that data, the thing that I think is impressive is that growth is very strong. It's strong across all sectors. And when you look at it, it's much more impressive than the 1.9% economic growth per quarter that we had from 2009 through 2016.
Growth, growth, growth. That seems to be what everybody's talking about, all of the top economists. What are some of the other key indicators telling us about the economy right now?
Well, you know, that's a great question. And I think one of the best answers to that is if we look at jobs. You know, the most recent jobs report came out, and a number of economists were disappointed because it was only 157,000 jobs created in July. However, if you look at that same report showed the May data being updated and showed the June data being updated. And so right now, if you look at the data in slide 5, what you see is that we have created just over 1.5 million jobs in the first 7 months of 2018. And that is better than the job growth at the end of July for 2016 and for 2017. And perhaps what's most promising about the recent data is that manufacturing growth was quite promising. The June versus June, we haven't got the July data yet for finalized for manufacturing, but the June to June 2017 to 2018 basically doubled, and for the month, and you've seen that was the best month in the last 20 years for increase in job growth. And the preliminary data shows that we had 37,000 new jobs in manufacturing in this country, when we've had a lot of months over the last 10 years where manufacturing jobs actually declined.
So the jobs in housing, stock and housing markets, can you talk a little bit more about those?
Well, you know, I think the if you don't mind taking a little a bit of a look at finishing up or wrapping up some of the points on the job market that I think make the next, say, 6 months interesting as it relates to jobs. The unemployment rate is down to 3.9%. Full employment is, depending on who you talk to, 5 to 5.5% unemployment, which means supposedly you can't get much lower than 5 or 5.5 to 5%. We're at 3.9%. And so the real question is, can the economy add more jobs? And something for the viewers to understand is this slide here, slide 7, shows us some really good information regarding hiring. And so here you have 2.41 million jobs that are available, that are being offered for employment. Companies need these employees. In the South, in the Midwest, it's 1.63 million. In the Northeast, it's 1.14 million. And in the West, it's 1.48 million. So we have 6.6 million jobs available that are currently not filled. And if you look at it, we only have 6.28 million people unemployed. So right now, if there was a good fit between those that are unemployed and the jobs that are available, we would have 0% unemployment and need to bring in more workers to fill in about 400,000 jobs. So the point is that it's a really, really strong economy. And the data that we just took a look at really indicates that we should start to see wages. The one thing that's lagged in this economy, stock market's done well in the last 4 or 5 years. The unemployment rates declined dramatically. Jobs relative to unemployed, jobs relative to people seeking employment has become very impressive. What we haven't seen is an increase in wages. And so hopefully we're going to start to see an improvement in wages, because adjusted for inflation, the one thing that this economy, President Obama's economy, going back 20 years, we haven't seen a real increase in wages, meaning adjusted for inflation, in about 20 years. So hopefully that's going to happen. As you look at it, to a couple of your bigger questions, consumer confidence is not at, but it's really close to an all-time record high. So when the Conference Board looks at and surveys consumers are saying things are really good. And if you look at small business, the engine of this country, more than 80% of them, almost 80% of Americans work for businesses with 200 employees or less. And if you look at the Small Business Confidence Index, oftentimes referred to as the Small Business Optimism Index, we're looking at a level of just over 107, and that's an all-time record high for that index. So especially small businesses, entrepreneurs, the people whose businesses today become the Fortune 500 companies in 5 or 10 years, they're very confident about this economy. If you look at your question regarding the stock market, the U.S. stock market is doing well, but if you look at the stock market, last year for 2017, the stock market was up almost 25%. It was a very, very good year for the stock market. And when people complain that, the rich are getting richer, what about the middle class, what about the poor? The thing to always remember is that everyone benefits, in our opinion, from the stock market. Because where are most 401ks, where are most pension funds invested? They're invested in the U.S. stock market for the most part. And think about what's happened in the last 10 years to the U.S. stock market. Certainly last year was one of the best years. And think about how your 401k, your pension fund, has appreciated under the growth in the U.S. stock market. Again, one of the concerns that we have this year, we've talked in previous shows about, we think that the idea of a trade war is a very bad idea. And the trade war, we think, is causing a bit of a sluggishness to the stock market. So far, the U.S. stock market is only up 2.4% for the year. It is, on an annualized basis, up just under 5% for the year. If you look at the data, 2017 closed at 24,719 on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Currently, at the end of July, it closed at 25,306. So again, if you double that for the second half of the year, it would be just under 5%, meaning we're going to have to see about the same growth, or about 1,000-point growth, or 600-point growth between now and the end of the year. The other thing that is important to point out about stocks is that we had a great year in 2016. We had a great year in 2017. We're not off to a real good year in 2018. And the thing to remember is the stock market, on average, since Dr. Dow invented the Dow Jones Industrial Average in 1890, it's averaged just under 12% growth per year. Some years better than others, some years negative, some years very positive. And so we're not only behind last year's pace, but we're behind the all-time regular average. If you look at probably the most interesting issue in this this month's McNair Center, Northwood University Monthly Economic Outlook, it's the whole discussion about corporate profits. And the reason why it's important to look at corporate profits is that a lot of individuals become very critical of profits. And again, people will say, well, hey, did I benefit from profits? How important are profits? Do companies make too much in terms of profits? And in a free and competitive market, in a moral, capitalistic market, there should be no limits on profits. And the thing that's important to note for our viewers is that profits are a great mechanism to explain how a moral and competitive free market works. In a free market, profits signal what the customer wants. You know, literally, if you don't like the profitability of a company, you have no one to blame but the consumer, because the consumer buys that good or buys that service or buys that asset. And when they purchase it, if they purchase enough of it and enough individuals purchase it, the company becomes more profitable and the stock price goes up. The dividend yields go up, whatever type of stock you're taking a look at. So in a free and competitive market, it really is a very moral way of judging how good a job a company's doing. In essence, the consumer decides whether a company is here today or gone tomorrow, based on whether they like your product, they like your service, they like the assets that you're producing, depending on the company that you have. It's also a great signal for other businesses. Hey, this company, this business is successful. Maybe I should look into it. You know, you think about 30 years ago, something as simple as a cell phone. A cell phone costs $12,000 in the mid-1980s. Monthly service was a couple $1,000s, and hardly anybody could afford a cell phone. But those that took the risk, that put in the early cell towers, that built the early cell phones, they were making good money. And that was a signal to other businesses and other entrepreneurs to get into that market. And you think about it, 30 years ago, hardly anybody had a cell phone. And today, hardly anyone doesn't have a cell phone. And today, you look at a cell phone and you think of all the things that you get for service in 2018 dollars. On average, that's well below $100 a month. You get texting, you get email, you have all the different things that I'm not even familiar with in terms of potential services. You can take great pictures. Your cell phone makes it unnecessary to own your own camera. You can take video with a cell phone today. And all that happened because customers really wanted to have that portable phone. And they literally followed what the leaders in the market were doing. And it's also, again, a great signal for individuals, young people that are looking to go to college. And they're looking at what degrees they should study. And they're looking at where they want to work, what companies they want to work for. Not just what company's doing well today, but what company may be doing well tomorrow. So profits are a great signal of that activity.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. So lots of positives to talk about.
Yep.
Are there any concerns? You mentioned trade wars a little bit. Maybe you could expand on the potential for that in tariffs. Any concerns you have after looking at July, looking at the last 6 months?
Well, you know, what's interesting is what I'm worried about is, you know, if you look here at slide 11, and you think about what's happening We just realized the best quarter, the final data for the first quarter of 2018 came out, and we just realized the best total profits in the history of the United States in terms of all corporate profits being able to being measured with publicly traded companies. U.S. corporations earned $1.92 trillion in profits in the first quarter of 2018. That's up 153 billion from the previous quarter. 900, almost $1 trillion of that was paid out in dividends. And so when you look at it and you think about the average from the time we started tracking it in 1950 to 2018 was $444 billion. Again, this quarter, the first quarter of 2018 is an all-time record high. The lowest was 1951 at 14.4 billion in a quarter. So think about 14.4 billion versus almost $2 trillion a quarter. It shows the dramatic growth in size and scope of the U.S. economy. And you think about the fact that you look at the life expectancy of the average American is up 50% from that same period. So a lot of the things that were produced, better food, lower prices for food, better drugs, life-saving equipment for surgeries, etc. So the thing that we worry about is that a lot of people in the political process want to tax profits at a much higher rate. This election is going to be very interesting relative to how we treat profits. Your question about trade, there's a lot of concern in the economics arena as to what could happen as it relates to a trade war. Could we have a trade war in 2018 similar to what we had in the mid to late 1980s? And so, those are the real concerns that we have. If you look at our overall assessment of the economy, our conclusion for this month's economic outlook is that we've got one of the best job markets in U.S. history. We have strong corporate profits that can be reinvested into R&D, new projects, new ideas, new businesses. Our 401ks are in a stronger position than ever before on the private sector side. Some of the government pensions at the state, local level need to be shored up. But in review, it's a very strong job market. It's a very strong corporate profits situation. It's a strong pension situation. There's a lot of money for R&D in the U.S. economy right now. Our real concern are that wages are weak. They haven't caught up per our earlier slide. And we're also concerned about where we are relative to the national debt and trade policy.
Well, lots of good things, lots of positivity.
Yes.
As you mentioned, one of the strongest indicators is really the power of the entrepreneur in small business. So I'm going to transition. Josh, who is our Entrepreneur of the Month from the McNair Center this month, and how did he become so successful?
So this month we're going to focus on Don Foss. And Don Foss is a giant in the used car retail industry. I mean, he owned the largest used car sales company in the world. And so Don Foss, he was a great entrepreneur. He was born in Detroit, came from very humble beginnings, and he actually came into the used car business through working for his father when he was in high school. After doing that, and after he graduated, he actually bought a tow truck and started buying used cars and selling them for scrap. And when he began doing that, he realized the type of profits that he could make and the money that he could make from selling these used cars, fixing them up, whatever he had to do to them, and selling them to people who maybe couldn't afford a brand new car. So he was using his abilities and putting his profits, putting his own money into these cars to solve someone else's problem, and he was making something back from it. So after doing this for a little while, he started selling his own used cars, and that company that he started eventually turned into the Don Foss Automotive Group. And so that was by 1970, he owned 17 used car lots. They were selling 18,000 cars annually. It turned into a huge company, and so when he was doing that in 6 different states, it was just super successful for him. After doing that for a little while, he used his own capital to actually finance used car sales, and he reinvested those profits back into his business, which is huge. Just as Dr. Nash was talking about the profits that entrepreneurs gain when they're able to reinvest that back into the business. It's amazing how it grows sales. He used that to establish his own company, which was the Credit Acceptance Corporation, and that was in 1972 that he established that, just a couple years after he had started the automotive group. He had used this Credit Acceptance Corporation to finance not only his own customers but those of thousands of other dealers across the country. So he was able to help people get in financing plans where they could purchase a car more affordably than just going to a dealership and buying one right off the lot. So he became very successful through his hard work, through his ability to understand how he could solve someone else's problem, and really to be able to work the market and to use his own smarts and his own entrepreneurial advantage to really help other people and make profits.
It's very, the concept's very near and dear to Northwood's heart, obviously, and I know that Don's actually endows a scholarship, multiple scholarships at Northwood University. As a student, Josh, what do you think is inspiring about his career, what he's accomplished, and what can you take away from that?
So I think especially Don's 8 keys to success are a huge thing. And as an entrepreneurial student myself and an economics major, I really value and respect his keys to success and how he uses free enterprise, how he uses capitalism in order to not only make money himself, but to help other people and to reinvest in the community, which is exactly what Northwood teaches, in our entrepreneurial program and through all of our majors. So Don actually said that a successful entrepreneur must decide what they want to do, find people with the same passion and goals, and provide them with the knowledge and tools to succeed, so they will meet and exceed their customers' needs and expectations. With this as a focus, you will not satisfy just your customers' needs and expectations, but your partners, employees, stockholders, and the communities in which you operate. So I just think that his ability to focus on capitalism and his ability to focus on meeting people's needs, taking care of people's problems, that's all really he needed to do in order to be very successful. And now, as the chairman of the board of the Credit Acceptance Corporation, which has a market capitalization value of over $2.1 billion, he's definitely been very successful by following those keys.
And as you look at Don McKenzie, the thing that's important to note is that number one, Credit Acceptance Corporation today, the article's a couple of years old that you have there, Josh. It has a market cap of about $8 billion today. So clearly the company is doing well, and the thing that's important is Don literally looks at the fact that a fairly decent percentage of his customers are individuals that can't purchase a car, that can't have a car financed through the normal process. Mm-hmm. These are people that have very low incomes, they have poor credit ratings, and not only does Don get them into a car where they can have a job and improve their income, their standard of living, and their credit rating, but they also have the ability to improve their credit rating to a point where they can go to a new car dealership and be able to purchase a brand new automobile. So Don has done so many things that literally have made his customers better off, and has done quite well for himself and the individuals that he impacts.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Well, thank you both. I appreciate it. We are wrapping up for today. You can catch a copy of the July and early August monthly economic outlook at mcnair.northwood.edu, the official website of the Robert and Janice McNair Center for the Advancement of Free Enterprise and Entrepreneurship at Northwood University. And you can tune in next month for our episode, which will recap the month of August and the beginning of September. Thank you so much for joining us.